I'm making a 3D game called the SS Destiny Disaster, and it is supposed to be like Resident Evil, but you're trapped in a spaceship. So if that sounds interesting to you, it's on Steam, and that link is in the description. So I want to start off by saying again, I'm making a 3D game, which is something I've always avoided, or at least tried not to do. Sometimes in the past when I have dabbled in 3D, it's always seemed ridiculously hard. Adding a third dimension means so much more work you gotta do. And then just beyond that, what about modeling? Well, 3D modeling is seemingly impossible when you're first starting off. So 2D just seems easier. Anyone can just draw something. There are a ridiculous amount of free programs out there that are very powerful, and you can do a lot with. So maybe now, if you're thinking you're just starting out, I gotta do 2D, well, pixel art is pretty easy. Easy, relatively speaking, compared to a lot of other styles, or just simply drawing in general. Drawing one pixel at a time is gonna be a lot quicker too, but that ends up leading to another problem though. Pixel art is hard to do well. And then beyond that, you have to make sure that you can animate your sprites. And that's going to be a lot of extra redrawing or whatever it might be. If it looks off, it's going to be very obvious. So 2D might be easier just to get going, just to get started, but it becomes pretty difficult when you want to do something well. And also, just thinking about what games are out there nowadays, games are obviously very visual, and graphics do matter, no matter how much people want to say they don't. 3D games are the majority of all games, and 3D is what dominates everyone's library catalog of games. You just think about what you play. I would bet 90% of everyone that you know and you, most of your games are 3D games. I think that's just how it is. So you have to also think about that when you're making a video game. So if 2D has pixel art, 3D has a low poly style, and that's kind of how they'll compare to each other. So let's kind of talk about 3D modeling. Blender is very well known as the free software to use for 3D modeling, and it is basically impossible to use at first unless you have a very good tutorial or a book or whatever. And honestly, I think most people probably just go into Blender, can't figure out how to move the camera around or do anything, and probably just leave. That's at least how I was in the beginning. But after you do that, Blender is pretty easy. It's actually kind of shocking how easy it is just to do some pretty good looking low poly stuff with very little skills. Now it's not going to be as good as a true 3D artist is, but we're already kind of assuming your 2D art here is not going to be as good as a real artist would be as well. So kind of going into that, what matters in a game is the aesthetics and the style that you pick. Somehow, maybe it's just me, but I've been finding 3D to hit that style and that aesthetic. To get that, it's a lot easier. And it could be easier because I'm doing this retro style. I am getting free textures from Ambient CG, which is great. There's also Polyhaven, but I've just been using Ambient CG. And if you just take those 1K, 2K, 4K, I think they have 8K textures as well. I just take the lowest, and then I just resize them. And there, I have a style. Whereas, I think if I had to do that for pixel art, I'd be drawing every pixel, even if it's 16 by 16. It's a lot harder to do. But if you just have a wall in Blender, it's just a cube that you changed around a little bit. So, could just be something with me personally, but I've been finding it easier to do that in 3D compared to how 2D ever was. So ultimately, I think what I want to say in this video is if you haven't, just go ahead and give 3D games a try. Even if it's just a really stupid, simple one that you make for a game jam. You know, make a low poly. It can be low poly like Cinti assets. It could be a retro style where those textures are pixelated and you can get those or make them yourselves. I don't want to say 3D modeling and texturing is easier than just making something for 2D assets. For me, it seems to have been easier. Don't even get me started on UV editing though. There's a lot of things about 3D modeling that take a lot of time to do, to get into it first. But after you've gotten past that hump, it's actually shockingly easy. So just go ahead and give that a try. The game I'm making right now is pretty much the best thing I've made so far, and it's also, I think, the best looking. So I'm going to keep on trying to make 3D games and improving. And maybe you should just give it a try too. Thanks for watching.